Welcome back to Radio Ecoshock.
We have an amazing faith in the capacity of the natural world to deal with the things we do to it and recover from them. And the fact of the matter is the natural world is far less in balance than we think it is. There are far fewer things out there that will make it repair itself. And we should have known this a long time ago. We have repeatedly overfished particular populations of fish and watched them collapse, and they never come back, or very rarely come back. You know, I talk about the Atlantic cod in the book. The Atlantic cod sustained a vigorous fishery, a tremendously valuable fishery for about 500 years, but we finally finished them off. And yes, there are still cod out there, and there's still hopeful fishermen and hopeful government scientists, and maybe they will come back because sometimes it happens. But there's nothing pushing them back. There's no law that says if you stop fishing, it will rebound instantly to where it was. Our faith in the balance of nature is totally unrealistic and unjustified.
Well, Peter, although you cover some solutions in a later chapter, you do have a haunting description of how a continuing loss of species could play out. Humans may not recognize the loss until it's way too late. Can you tell us just a little bit about what that experience would be like?
At the present time, we are in the middle, or in the early stages perhaps, of what people are now calling the Holocene mass extinction. There have been 5 mass extinctions in the past, and the biggest was the end of the Permian, when 90% of species went extinct. If it had been 100%, we wouldn't be here talking about it, and there would never have been any dinosaurs. The experiment with life would have been over. Fortunately, it was only 90%. But believe me, if you take away 90% of species, you substantially change the ecology, and you substantially alter what's going to happen next. We are in the middle of the most rapid increase in the rate of extinction that has occurred in geological history. It is caused by us. We started out in the Pleistocene when we learned how to hunt in groups. We became quite good at finishing off large mammals. We have gone on and finished off lots of fish species and lots of other animals by overhunting them. We now typically cause extinctions of species by altering their habitats so they cannot survive, or taking over their habitat and changing it totally into something else. So we're very good at causing the extinction of species. People such as Edward Wilson at Harvard University and a number of others have looked at this in detail. They've looked at the rates at which species are disappearing, and they're making predictions like 50% or more of all species on Earth gone by 2100. That is enormous, and that doesn't say the process stops at 2100, because if we keep going the way we're going, we'll still be causing extinction. What you have to do is imagine a forest with hardly any kinds of trees left, or imagine a forest with no kinds of trees left. If you don't have any tree species, you don't have a forest anymore. And if you don't have a forest, there's lots of other things that disappear. And I believe the extent of the biodiversity loss, which is what this is so great that we should be really very concerned about it, because we need these things. These creatures out there, these plant species and these animal species and even the microbes, we need them. They provide our food, they provide our environment, they provide the oxygen in the air we breathe, they provide what we use for our lives. And we're part of it. We can't survive without the rest of it. And I think the loss of species that is predicted is so extreme that we would be foolish to assume that somehow none of the species that really matter to us will get lost. They will. And then what do we do? Because we don't yet know how to create life.
If you were just tuning in, our guest on Radio Ecoshock is author and ecologist Peter F. Sale. In your book, Our Dying Planet, you suggest there are 4 possible paths for our civilization now. I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about them. Let's start with that Belvedere world. Why call it that, and what does it look like?
I called it Belvedere because Belvedere sounds luxurious and comfortable. And that is exactly what the world looks like to those people on the inside. And basically, the Belvedere world is the one we're headed towards on a 8-lane superhighway as fast as we can get there. It is a world of gated communities, fortress communities, armored communities, living in luxury inside their walls, protected from the nasty environment outside. And then between these gated communities, there's kind of a Mad Max sort of a world of people living in horrible conditions with famine and starvation and war and disease and all the other bad things you don't want to think about. This, I fear, is the world we're going to go towards as the rich countries initially make sure they have what they want, to hell with the rest, and then as things deteriorate even further, it will become the rich communities within the rich countries that become the gated communities. And some people will live for several generations in quite wonderful surroundings, but ultimately they will either be vanquished by the desperate hordes or they will die of diseases which get in through all kinds of fortification, and I don't see it as a good solution. It's not the solution I would want to see, but that's the most likely one we're headed towards, and all of our current behavior in the developed countries suggests that's the world we're going towards.
That's the me first world. Well,
me first world.
Yeah. Well, you have a second scenario that sounds more friendly, at least for me. You call it the Woodstock future. What do you mean there?
The Woodstock future is the one that you hear typically put forward by people who want to argue against changing our energy strategies. The people who want to argue that there's no way we can have an advanced civilization and have carbon-free fuels. The Woodstock world is a world of people living in very basic surroundings with minimal enterprise, minimal energy sources, a sort of a fondly hippie-esque movement where you go back to basics and you don't have international trade and you do not have all the things that we now think of as making up our advanced civilization. You give up the things that take energy as a way of stopping using energy. You go back to an agrarian society. It becomes a much simpler society. It could be a very attractive society in some ways, but I don't think it's a society we're going to choose to get to because people don't want to give things up. So it's a society that I don't actually see it as coming. It is possible, but I don't see it as coming because most people won't want to have it. And if people don't want to have it, it's not going to happen.
And you contrast that with your third possible future called Technopolis, and I guess that's self-explanatory, or is it?
I think it is. Technopolis is the future, and there are people out there right now who are solving, in their own minds, solving the climate change problem by building elaborate sunscreens that will be floated up in space, or they're going to pump sulfur dioxide up into the atmosphere to counteract the intensity of the sunlight and reflect the light away so we don't heat up so much. I mean, it's a technical solution to everything. This is the future where science and engineering solve all problems without any difficulty at all. We just invent our way out of the mess we're making. I think the Technopolis future has one absolutely huge flaw, and the flaw is that we only have one planet to live on, and if we make a mistake, we have screwed ourselves. I don't believe that any technical advance has ever gone forward without mistakes being made, and I don't think we have the luxury of making mistakes. It is a commonly held belief by those people who genuinely believe that we do not need the natural world. We can do without it. We'll simply invent replacements for the things the natural world provides for us. There are people who will try and move in that direction, and I think it'll be a failure. And when I say a failure, I mean a failure with a collapse of civilization. I think it would happen.
But you do see a fourth alternative pathway. What is that?
And my fourth alternative I call New Atlantis. This is obviously the one that I favor. This is a world where we have advanced civilization, we have all the toys and the inventions which we love. We have an intellectually vibrant civilization. We have culture and the arts and the sciences and all these things going on. But we are living in a world which is sustainably managed, a world which continues to provide the environmental goods and services that our lives depend upon. This is a world which is reachable, but it is a much more difficult one to reach than Belvedere because it's going to require that we make some quite difficult changes quite soon. We have got to look at how we use fuel, and we have got to use different fuels. We have got to find ways of being much more efficient in our use of energy so that we do not waste it and pollute in the process. We have got to look at our overuse of natural resources, the renewable resources like the resources provided from our farms, from forests, from fisheries, making sure that we are using those at a rate which is sustainably replaceable year after year. And I think inevitably in this world we have got to look at a human population which is not growing, and preferably a human population which is smaller than the one we currently have.
As we finish off, is there anything else you'd like to add for our listeners?
The most important thing I would like to say is don't get depressed by this kind of news. There's no point in sitting around being depressed. Become active. Talk to people about it. Talk to them about the fact that you can't simply put environmental problems on one side while you deal with other things.
This is Radio Ecoshock. We've been talking with Peter F. Sale. He's currently involved with the United Nations University, and he's a professor emeritus at the University of Windsor. Peter knows the sea and its creatures, and that comes out in his new book, provocatively titled Our Dying Planet, from the University of California Press. Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
It was wonderful to talk to you, Alex.
This is Radio Ecoshock. I'm your host, Alex Smith.